The mockery begins. The chamber of the Galactic Council stretched like a cathedral of steel and light, a place where hundreds of species gathered beneath towering pillars that shimmered with alien symbols. The overlords sat upon their high thrones, their faces hidden behind masks of gold and iron, their voices amplified by machines so that every word carried across the endless hall. They were the masters of the galaxy, the rulers who had conquered worlds beyond counting. Their empire stretched from star to star, and in their long reign they had broken every race that dared resist them. Now they turned their gaze to Earth. At the center of the hall, a small delegation of humans stood. They looked fragile compared to the massive reptilian guards that flanked the walls, or the armored giants that bowed before the overlords. The humans wore no armor, no weapons. They stood only in plain suits, their faces calm, their eyes steady. For many in the crowd, it seemed laughable. How could such a small young species hope to survive the weight of the Empire? The Emperor of the Overlords leaned forward. His voice shook the air like thunder. He spoke of Earth as if it were nothing, a child's world barely crawling out of its cradle. He called humanity weak, fragile, unworthy of the stars. He reminded them of the fleets above their skies, fleets large enough to blot out the constellations. He spoke of how easily Earth could be burned, how quickly its oceans could boil, how little effort it would take to reduce humanity to ash. The hall erupted in laughter. Alien dignitaries hissed and barked with amusement. Some beat their claws on the floor, others clanged their armored fists against the seats. The sound echoed like a storm of mockery, a storm meant to crush the humans where they stood. And yet, the humans did not bow. Their leader, a tall man with silver hair, stood at the front of the delegation. His name was not remembered by the galaxy then, but the way he looked upon the overlords was burned into history. His face showed no fear, no trembling. He stood as if he had walked into nothing more than a room filled with noise. The Emperor demanded submission. He ordered humanity to kneel. He called them insects before the eyes of the galaxy. Still, the man did not move. The silence from the humans began to feel heavier than the laughter of the crowd. Even the lesser races, long broken by centuries of tyranny, felt something stir in that silence. Then it happened. The man laughed. It was not the nervous laugh of fear. It was not the mocking laugh of arrogance. It was a simple human laugh, quiet at first, as if he had heard something foolish and could not help himself. In the great hall of the council, where silence and fear had always ruled, the sound spread like fire. His shoulders shook, and then others in the human delegation began to laugh with him. The laughter grew louder. The overlords froze. The Emperor's golden mask tilted downward, his burning eyes narrowing. He had expected begging. He had expected screams. Never in his rule had a lesser race dared laugh at him. The chamber quieted, the alien dignitaries uncertain now. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others glanced at one another, unsure if this was bravery or madness. The man stopped laughing, his voice calm as he finally spoke. He told the overlords a story, a simple story of Earth. He spoke of kings and empires, of rulers who thought themselves untouchable. He spoke of tyrants who declared their power eternal, who demanded the world bow before them, and he reminded them of how all those rulers had fallen. He told them that history did not remember their threats, only their ruins. The humans stood silent again after his words, their faces unshaken. For the first time in centuries, the overlords felt something they had not felt before. It was not fear of weapons, not fear of fleets, not fear of numbers. It was the fear of defiance, the fear of a people who refused to break. The Emperor rose from his throne, his voice booming in anger, but still the humans looked at him without bowing. They had no fleets in the chamber. They had no soldiers standing at their side. Yet their laughter, their calm, their unbroken gaze, it was stronger than armies. Whispers spread through the crowd. Some alien leaders looked down at the humans with curiosity instead of mockery. For the first time, the laughter of the council had been turned back upon itself. The power of the overlords did not feel eternal anymore. It felt fragile, as if one simple laugh had cracked it. The Emperor's fury filled the chamber, but humanity had already planted a seed. The galaxy had seen something new, a race that stood unbowed, that dared to laugh in the face of power, and in that moment, the long shadow of the overlords began to tremble. The human response. The chamber still shook with the echoes of human laughter. What began as a small sound had grown into something that rattled the walls of power. The overlords had expected silence or cries of mercy, but instead they had heard something they could not control. Laughter. It spread like a fire that refused to be put out. The Emperor stood in silence for a moment, his mask gleaming under the pale light. His voice broke through with anger, heavy and sharp. He demanded that the humans explain themselves. He demanded to know why they laughed when faced with death. To him it was madness. To him it was weakness pretending to be strength. The human leader did not flinch. He stepped forward, and when he spoke, his words carried not with arrogance but with certainty. He said that humanity had heard the same threats many times before, long before they reached the stars. He reminded the Council of Earth's own history, centuries filled with conquerors and tyrants who claimed they would rule forever. He told them of kings who built empires in stone, of generals who believed their armies could not be defeated, of nations that thought the world would bend to their will, and yet, he said, every one of them had fallen. He spoke slowly, carefully, so that every word struck like iron. He told them humanity did not laugh because they were blind. They laughed because they knew something the overlords did not. Power never lasts. Fear never lasts. The overlords may rule today, but tomorrow belongs to those who refuse to bow. The aliens in the hall whispered to one another. Some of them had never heard a species speak this way. For generations they had lived in silence, bowing to the Empire, believing there was no other path. And now, before their eyes, stood humans who dared to look at the Emperor as though he were nothing more than a man hiding behind gold. The Emperor's voice rose again. He called humans reckless. He accused them of pride. He promised destruction, not only for Earth but for any who dared to follow their example. His words were filled with fire, but they no longer struck as deep as before. The human leader answered not with threats but with stories. He told them of times when humanity had faced the impossible. He spoke of plagues that nearly ended entire nations, of wars that tore the world apart, of disasters that should have destroyed them, yet every time humanity had risen again. He said that laughter was not a sign of madness, it was a weapon of the spirit. It was the proof that even when standing before death, humanity could not be broken. The hall grew uneasy. The alien delegates who had mocked humanity earlier now sat quietly. Some shifted in their seats, others stared at the humans with new eyes. They had seen species beg for mercy. They had seen them fall to their knees before the overlords. But never had they seen a species that smiled in defiance. The Emperor tried again to strike fear. He reminded them of the fleets above Earth. He reminded them of the weapons that could turn oceans into steam and mountains into dust. He spoke of planets that had been erased from the map, worlds that resisted and now were nothing but rubble floating in space. His voice grew louder, harsher, desperate to push the humans into silence, but once again, the human delegation laughed. The sound rolled across the chamber like thunder, and this time it was not just one or two voices. Every human in the group joined. Their laughter was not cruel, not mocking. It was steady, fearless, and it carried a message that the galaxy could not ignore. We are not afraid of you. For a moment, the Emperor hesitated. His fury burned behind his mask, but something else slipped through. Uncertainty. He had broken empires, enslaved civilizations, silenced entire races, yet here stood a small group of humans who did not break. The galaxy began to wonder. What kind of people could laugh in the face of annihilation? What kind of species looked upon fleets of war and did not tremble? Was it courage or was it something deeper? The overlords felt a chill in their throne room. Their empire had always relied on fear, on the belief that no one could resist them. But in that hall before all the galaxy, the first cracks had appeared. Fear was no longer absolute. The human leader's final words of the day were simple. He looked directly at the Emperor and said, "We know what you are. You are not eternal. You are only loud, and when the noise fades, you will be nothing." With that, the human delegation turned and walked away. They did not kneel, they did not bow, and they did not wait for permission. They left the hall with their heads high, and the silence they left behind was heavier than the threat of any weapon. The aliens in the chamber sat in awe. They had witnessed something no one expected. Humanity had spoken not with power of fleets, not with the strength of weapons, but with the strength of spirit. And in that strength was something the overlords could not command. The seeds were planted. The galaxy had seen humanity not as weak but as unbroken, and though no one dared say it out loud, The thought hung in the air like a spark ready to catch fire. If humans could defy the overlords, maybe others could too. A hidden strength. The laughter of the humans haunted the chamber long after they had left. For centuries, no one had ever dared to walk away from the Galactic Overlords without fear. Yet humanity had done so, and they had done it with laughter. The Emperor raged in silence. His voice, which once commanded entire fleets, had failed to break a handful of humans. That failure stung deeper than any wound. He ordered his council to remind the galaxy of their power. He ordered ships to be sent toward Earth, not to destroy it, but to surround it like a predator circling prey. He believed that if humanity would not bow with words, they would bow at the sight of a fleet so large it could darken their sky. And so it was done. From the edges of the solar system, the Overlord warships came. They were massive, each one the size of a floating city, bristling with weapons that had silenced countless worlds. They entered Earth's orbit like a storm of steel, blotting out the stars. The blue planet below seemed small and fragile beneath their shadow. From the surface, people could look up and see the lines of ships stretching across the heavens, like scars in the night sky. The Overlords believed this sight would finally break humanity. They believed fear would return stronger than before, but the humans did not bow. Instead, Earth began to broadcast a message across the galaxy. It was not a speech of surrender. It was not a plea for mercy. It was a window into life on Earth. The broadcast showed streets filled with people going about their daily lives, children playing in parks, workers in factories, farmers in their fields. The images showed laughter, music, families gathered around tables. It showed no fear. It showed no panic. The galaxy watched in confusion. How could a race facing the greatest fleet ever assembled live as if nothing had changed? How could they smile beneath the shadow of annihilation? Then came the second part of the broadcast. The screen shifted. The camera revealed the blackness of space. Slowly, one by one, shadows moved from behind asteroids and moons. They were ships, human ships, massive vessels that had been hidden from the galaxy's eyes. For years, humanity had built in secret. They had mined their asteroids, hollowed their moons, and forged fleets in silence. The human warships emerged, their hulls dark, their weapons glowing faintly against the void. They were not as large as the Overlord ships, but they were many. More than anyone believed Earth could build. They spread across the system steady and silent like wolves stepping out of the forest. The galaxy gasped. The laughter of humanity now carried weight. It was not the laughter of madness. It was the laughter of a predator who knew it was not prey. It was the laughter of a people who had prepared for the moment when someone would try to break them. The Overlords remained silent for a moment. They had expected weakness, not this hidden strength. Their empire had always relied on fear, on the belief that no one could resist them. Yet here was Earth smiling, laughing, and showing a fleet ready to fight. The Emperor's mask turned cold. He ordered his ships to stand their ground. He believed their numbers still gave them power. But deep within, a seed of doubt had formed. If humanity could hide this, what else had they hidden? The broadcast ended with a single message from the human leader. His voice was calm, steady, without anger. He said, "You thought we would kneel. Instead, we stand. You thought we would tremble. Instead, we laugh. And now you see why." Across the galaxy, alien races who had long accepted the rule of the Overlords felt something stir. They had lived under the shadow of an empire for centuries, but now they saw a new light. Humanity had revealed not only ships, but something far more dangerous, a refusal to fear. The Overlords had always believed fear was stronger than hope. But as they stared at the silent human fleet, hope began to spread across the stars. The balance of the galaxy had shifted. Humanity, the species once mocked as weak, had revealed itself as something else entirely. And in that moment, the Overlords realized that their greatest weapon, fear, was no longer enough. The turning point, the galaxy had seen many fleets before, but never one like this. The Overlords' armada hung in the skies above Earth, their warships black and heavy, their weapons glowing like the eyes of predators ready to strike. Opposite them, the hidden human fleet now stood revealed, a wall of steel forged in silence. The council chambers across the galaxy filled with whispers. Delegates who had once laughed at humans now leaned forward in shock. How could such a young race build such power in secret? How could they smile while staring down an empire that had crushed worlds for centuries? The Emperor sat upon his throne, silent behind his mask of gold. His eyes burned like fire as he watched the broadcast of Earth's defiance. Rage boiled within him, but behind that rage was something else, something he had not felt in generations. Hesitation. Still, he could not show weakness. He rose from his throne, his voice booming across the chamber. He called humanity reckless. He accused them of arrogance. He declared that their ships were nothing but toys before the engines of the Empire. His words thundered across the hall, meant to remind the galaxy that fear still ruled. But then the human leader appeared again. He stood before the council chamber, calm, steady, his silver hair shining beneath the lights. His face carried no trace of fear. He looked directly at the Emperor and laughed once more. That laugh was different now. It was not quiet. It was not small. It was loud, clear, and unshaken. The sound rolled across the chamber like a wave, echoing through the stone and steel walls. It cut through the Emperor's words like a blade, and in that instant something broke. The alien delegates shifted uneasily. For centuries, the Emperor's voice had been the only sound of power in that hall, but now laughter challenged it. And more than that, the laughter carried truth. It carried strength. Some delegates lowered their heads, hiding their own smiles. Others whispered in their native tongues. The air felt different, charged, as though a storm had entered the chamber. The Emperor roared in anger. He shouted that humanity's laughter would be drowned in fire. He promised that Earth would be reduced to dust. His voice shook with fury, but the words no longer struck with the same weight, because for the first time the galaxy no longer believed him. The human leader raised his hand for silence. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost gentle. He said that the Empire believed itself eternal, but eternity was a lie. He told them that laughter was not weakness, it was freedom. He said, "When we laugh, we tell you that you cannot rule us. When we laugh, we remind you that your chains mean nothing." The chamber went still. His words carried more power than any weapon. The galaxy listened, not to the overlords, but to the humans. The Emperor clenched his fists. His empire had always thrived on silence, on obedience. But now silence had been broken. The humans had given the galaxy a new sound to follow. Laughter, defiance, hope. In distant systems, messages began to spread. Alien worlds that had once bowed quietly now whispered the human words. Some began to imagine what it would be like to rise. Some began to believe they could. The overlords felt the shift. They saw the danger. They realized that the war was no longer about fleets or weapons. It was about belief. And belief was something they could not control with fire alone. The Emperor looked down at the human leader, his mask hiding the fury beneath. He could destroy Earth, yes, but even if he did, the laughter would remain. The galaxy had already heard it. The sound could not be erased. The human delegation stood together, their faces steady, their eyes unbroken. They had revealed no fear, only strength. Their laughter had spread farther than their ships, farther than their weapons. It had reached the hearts of those who had lived too long in silence. And so the turning point came. Not with a battle, not with fire, but with laughter that shook the stars. The overlords realized in that moment that they could lose. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. For the first time in their long reign, they saw the truth. The galaxy no longer belonged to fear. It belonged to those who could laugh in its face. Laughter that shook the stars. The galaxy had always known the sound of fear. It had echoed through the halls of conquered worlds, whispered in the darkness of prisons, carried on the breath of leaders who bowed to survive. But now, for the first time in centuries, another sound rose above it. Human laughter. The overlords could not silence it. They could not drown it in their threats, nor crush it with their fleets. That laughter had spread too far, too fast. In markets on distant planets, alien traders repeated the story. In mines where enslaved species bent their backs, whispers turned to chuckles. On ships where soldiers once marched without question, quiet smiles began to spread. The sound of human defiance moved through the galaxy like fire on dry grass. The Emperor sat in his throne, his mask of gold heavy upon his face. He could order Earth destroyed in a single command, but he understood something deeper now. Even if Earth burned, their laughter would live. It had already planted itself in the hearts of billions. He clenched his fists, but no order came. The humans knew this. Their leader stood in the council chamber once more, unshaken, calm. He did not speak of weapons. He did not speak of war. Instead, he looked at the Emperor and smiled. That smile carried the weight of every human who had ever refused to break. It carried the memory of kings toppled, of tyrants erased, of chains shattered. He said only one line: "You cannot rule those who laugh at you." The words cut through the chamber like a blade. Delegates who had once kept their heads down now looked up. Some dared to smile. A few even laughed, quiet at first, then louder. The sound grew, carried by voices that had long forgotten how to resist. The Overlords' power was not only fleets and weapons. It was belief. Belief that they were eternal. Belief that no one could stand against them. But that belief cracked in that moment. The galaxy had seen humans defy the greatest power of all, not with armies but with laughter, and once broken, belief could not be rebuilt. The Emperor roared, his fury shaking the chamber. He ordered silence, but the sound of laughter rose higher. He ordered obedience, but the delegates no longer trembled as before. His empire felt weaker, smaller, fragile in ways he could not hide. Far beyond the council chamber, the Overlord fleets waited above Earth. They held their positions, weapons ready, but they did not fire. They did not move. For the first time, hesitation ran through their ranks. They looked upon the human warships and saw not prey but equals. The galaxy shifted that day. It was not a battle of steel but of spirit. Humanity had shown the stars that fear could be broken. They had shown that power built on silence could fall to laughter. The story of Earth spread quickly. In hidden corners of the Empire, rebels spoke the words. In broken colonies, prisoners smiled when they remembered the sound of defiance. Even those who had never seen a human now believed in their courage. The Overlords could still destroy. They could still burn worlds. But the galaxy no longer saw them as gods. They saw them as rulers made of noise, loud and heavy but not eternal. And once the galaxy stopped believing in eternity, change became possible. Humanity returned to Earth that day unbroken. Their fleet still hovered, their laughter still echoed. They had not fired a single shot, yet they had shifted the balance of the galaxy. They had given the universe a gift greater than weapons. They had given it hope. The Emperor sat in silence, his throne no longer untouchable. He could not erase what had been heard. He could not undo what had been seen. The empire he had built on fear now trembled under a sound that was stronger than fire. And so the galaxy remembered. They remembered the day humanity stood before an empire and laughed. They remembered how the Overlords mocked them, and how the humans turned mockery into defiance. They remembered how laughter shook the stars. From that day on, the galaxy carried a new truth. Humanity was not to be ruled. Humanity was not to be broken. Humanity would never be silenced. The sound of laughter still echoes in the memories of those who were there. It was not the sound of arrogance. It was not the sound of madness. It was the sound of freedom, a reminder that no power lasts forever and no empire stands unchallenged. The Overlords had tried to intimidate Earth. They had tried to make the humans bow. Instead, the humans laughed, and in doing so, they changed the galaxy forever.